I hope all is well for you. Today we will see why did Bill Gates save Apple. Welcome to the question answer channel. The channel where you will find the answer to everything. Today David Seidman, John Cate, Patrick Taylor and Jack Schofield are going to present their answers to us. Let's see David Seidman's first answer. At one point Microsoft made more money off of every Mac sold than Apple did, because most Mac users bought a copy of Office, and Microsoft made a much higher margin on the software than Apple did on the hardware. Bill Gates knew that Apple would always fundamentally be a hardware company and therefore never in direct competition with Microsoft. We continue with John Cate's answer.
Microsoft invested in Apple because they believed it was a good bet to return to profitability. Steve Jobs had just returned to the company, and Bill Gates had known Jobs for more than 20 years. They hadn't always had the best working relationship, but there was undoubtedly a great deal of mutual respect there. Gates knew that Jobs would bring Apple back if he had the working capital and the software support to do it. Gates' pledge that Microsoft would continue to make software for the Mac was enormously valuable to Jobs as he rebuilt the Macintosh brand with new and better products. Making sure Apple survived was also a good business decision for Microsoft. Apple's computers were competition for the x86 PC market, where Microsoft's Windows 95 had about 98% market share at the time. The existence of a strong Apple, with viable and popular computers, helped Microsoft refute accusations that it was a monopoly, while at the same time not really hurting Microsoft's bottom line, since Jobs only intended to compete in the high-end PC segment. Microsoft got the same licensing fee no matter what segment of the market an x86 PC was sold in. Bill Gates is a smart businessman. Always has been. He knew an Apple with Jobs calling the shots, especially a more mature Steve Jobs than the one who ran the company in the 1970s and 1980s, was a good bet. And Microsoft made a lot of money off its investment in the new Apple.
The next answer is from Patrick Taylor.
He didn't save Apple and never intended to, but you need a bit of backstory first. Back in 1992, the San Francisco Canyon Company was hired by Apple to port QuickTime to Windows. This same company was hired the following year by Intel to improve Windows video codecs. Eventually both Microsoft and Intel collaborated together on this project to create the display control interface. Apple Computer vs. San Francisco Canyon Co., December 6, 1994, alleged that San Francisco Canyon Company used QuickTime code as part of this project. Intel and Microsoft were both added to the lawsuit. On March 3, 1995, a temporary restraining order was issued against Microsoft prohibiting their distribution of portions of the SDK for video for Windows, NY Times report on court order. Microsoft pulled the offending code, but Apple was still threatening a reputed $1.255 billion lawsuit. Microsoft allegedly threatened to kill Office for the Mac if Apple went ahead with it. Once Jobs took over from Gil Amelio, a quick debate occurred within Apple's executive. Some people like Avi Tavanian pushed for the lawsuit to continue, but Jobs ultimately decided that he needed stability more than a possible patent payoff. Jobs offered Microsoft a sweetheart deal, a patent cross-licensing agreement, the end of all ongoing lawsuits and threatened lawsuits, and the installation of a custom version of Internet Explorer on Mac OS. Microsoft had to commit to developing and promoting Office for the Mac and Internet Explorer for at least 5 years, and as a vote of confidence in Apple's future, Microsoft was to purchase $150 million in non-voting preferred stock which couldn't be sold for 3 years. The $150 million sounds like a lot, but at the time Apple still had $1.2 billion in cash and securities. Source: Apple CFO Fred Anderson is paraphrased in MS to invest $150 million in Apple. In fact, the Office for Mac news was a much bigger deal. This wasn't Bill Gates trying to help a competitor, even if it was in some ways in Microsoft's interests. This was Bill Gates realizing that he was being offered the deal of a lifetime and he, being no fool, took it.
The following answer is from Jack Schofield.
There were a lot of reasons. One reason was that it made Gates feel good to help his old friend. One reason is that Apple and Microsoft did a patent deal at the same time. One reason is that Apple agreed to make Internet Explorer the default browser on Mac OS. One reason was that it might have decreased antitrust pressure on Microsoft, though it didn't. The judge said Apple and Linux didn't have enough market share to matter. One of the biggest reasons was that Mac users were extremely profitable. Mac users bought millions of retail copies of Windows, and they bought millions of copies of Microsoft Office either for Windows or for the Mac. Mac users paid far more for Windows than PC users, who got it pre-installed, and they paid slightly more for Office. Mac users were therefore worth more to Microsoft than Windows users, on average, though there were not as many of them. When the Mac was launched in 1984, Bill Gates appeared on stage with Jobs, and the graphical versions of Word, Excel and PowerPoint were all developed first for the Mac. Microsoft Office also appeared first for the Mac. The Mac didn't have as much software as Windows, so there was less competition, and Mac owners paid higher prices for software. It was good business. Apple fanboys love to hate Microsoft, of course, but Microsoft was always the Mac's biggest supporter, and Gates offered to help Apple to make Mac OS a global standard. Having Microsoft Office gave the Mac a huge advantage against Amiga, Atari ST, Acorn Archimedes and other rivals that didn't.
The video is over. Thank you for staying until the end. If this answer helps you, please help us too by leaving a like and subscribing to this channel. It allows us to move forward on YouTube. Friends, it's now the end of this video. Remember to leave a comment to tell us if these answers are more for you. See you soon.